Keegan, good to be back, man. Yeah,
Great to see you.
I'm glad that the trip across the border to Croatia wasn't too long of one.
Yeah, it's like if you go across and then they say no, no, you're not allowed back in. It's like, well, my whole life's over there. Like, what am I going to do now? There's
Yeah,
that kind of funny feeling. Actually, it happened in a bit of a funny way because the rental car that we had, it was actually the papers this time because we've rented and re-rented. It's only in my wife's name, so I drove to the border and they said, no, your papers need to be in your name, otherwise they won't let you back in from Croatia. So I had to actually go back and that involved going across on a boat ferry and then back to the car rental place. It was only about an hour or so, but yeah, it was an extra like 2 hours on the
yep.
trip. And then but I had my daughter with me, so it was kind of fun. We had a nice little adventure for the day. And yeah, we ended up staying in a hotel like 20 minutes from home because she wanted to like make more of an adventure out of it. Yeah, fun times.
That's awesome.
So
Well, I figure if they kick you out of one country in Europe, you just drive to the next one, right?
yeah, like I sometimes I think about that often at the moment. Like I could take my backpack and my kids and I'd be fine. Like start again somewhere else. And I've got about 2 grand worth of gym equipment, which I'd like to sort of not have to keep repurchasing because I just bought a couple of grand. I probably bought about 5 grand worth of stuff in the Channel Islands, and then that's in storage, which is hopefully going to get shipped here. But we have to get our residency here for it to be able to ship to us. So
Yep.
it's like just yeah. So ideally, I wouldn't have to keep buying that couple of grand worth of gym gear, but I guess it's not the end of the world if that's the price to pay. I kind of like the idea of taking on a different country each year, but yeah, we'll see. Ben's put together an education. He's talking about his plans for an education system. I don't know if he's posted that on Instagram yet, but um, I'm sure we won't let the secret out of the bag too much with this. But that idea of it's one of the areas that needs to be disrupted, right? Is like schooling and alternative schooling, especially for people who don't want to have a fixed residence. There is some really good stuff in that niche, but yeah, there'll be more of that for us. Maybe like that would probably be the biggest influence of where I'll move to next. Would be somewhere that has like good kind of international schooling. I've forgotten what the word for it is actually. There's like a homeschooling international kind of vibe where people move around the world and
Mhm.
but there's like hubs of where like families that are into that congregate for periods of time so that their kids can kind of interact and yeah, it's another area that needs innovation, and there's a lot of really really cool stuff going on at the moment. So that is really the point of this podcast, is to talk about what's good in innovation in the space of cryptos and in the space of coaching and anything else that kind of pops up in sort of business innovation. I think is the purpose of this one. We're going to call it cryptos and coaching, and this will be the first episode of that series. We just agreed right before this podcast. So I think it's good to get some background of like where we're at with the crypto and coaching type journey.
Mhm.
When I talk to coaches, I know that they're often interested in cryptos, but they're generally kind of confused and feel like, oh, it's too new and it's a bit overwhelming for me. Not really sure where to get started. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure the thing is, like, everyone has felt like that at some stage in the last decade. Like even those who were early to Bitcoin, like they
Mhm.
felt like that. And so it's everybody, and it's just a question of when you're going to go through from that feeling of like, oh, that's something I wish I probably should know about. I wish I did know about, but I don't know about. You go through that wall to like, I kind of get what's going on here, and I'm gonna continue down that path. When would you say, or where would you say you're at on that journey, Zach?
I think, like, to be honest, I think all of us are in like inning one, second at bat, to use an American baseball term, but like really in like the really early part of the game. Because I think that one of the big things that I think we're both passionate about, I think crypto is a medium of that. Like you hit on, it's like innovation. I think when you look at the way that we're really going to have to move to disrupt, like how do you massively impact health and wellness? Which is kind of what we were doing by supporting coaches. Like I always view it as like, how do you give the people helping the people better tools to succeed? And the best way to do that is to innovate, to problem solve, to give them frameworks, to really help them kind of grow and scale their reach. And I think when you look at that, like crypto seems like a no-brainer because of all of the things you can do with it. We've talked about on some other stuff on how to build a brand, how to really tie in like long tail value to your customer base, like how to stay connected. And I think if you can get people on the forefront of that, like adopting it, starting to think about that, people are going to come up with some super creative ways of how to apply this new technology. And they're going to do so in a way that like directly benefits like both the growth of their business, but like the big long-term impact is like healthier people living better lives, being more productive. And like the more healthy people you have, like the better your communities are, like the better kind of the world gets as a whole. And the faster we can help people understand how to use the technology to do that, the faster like everything is going to change for the better.
Yeah. It seems mostly like the way things have been structured put the brakes on, and now there's this possibility to take the brakes off. I was talking about it on Instagram today of like, if you could buy shares in the best concepts and best brands in fitness, like you can with Apple and Tesla, and you could kind of fanboy for them and they could increase in value, or like you can with Bitcoin and Ethereum or Dogecoin, if that fanboy stuff could actually lead to people having serious long-term wealth. Anyone who saw if Ben Patrick, if ATG was a cryptocurrency and it launched with, you know, 1 billion tokens, and those tokens were worth 0.01 of a cent, and so the total value of that currency was, you know, $10,000 on day one. Now everybody's sitting on a freaking gold mine. All those people who've done the program and gone, shit, this is the real deal. And they, rather than just doing a shout out on Instagram or, you know, playing along with the way we can with that, like the thing is, these other companies have this system behind them that gives it exponential financial potential. So if Ben Patrick held on to 1 million of his, you know, 1 billion coins, or 100 million of his 1 billion coins, Ben Patrick now has become extremely wealthy just through, you know, those mechanisms of effectively like a share, you know, mechanism, or like if you launch your own cryptocurrency. So I was just thinking about that today of like, we're kind of excluded from this system where people get to say, hey, this is worth money and this is a good company and I want to support it. So you can do that for Tesla and Apple, or you can do that for these crypto brands, which are effectively, number goes up, like they're effectively like pure speculation. And you can't really do that with like really good stuff like ATG for coaches. That's where like, that's the like where we could go with this.
Well, it becomes like that personal IPO concept. Like you're spot on, like to grow and launch and take a company public, there's a lot of work and a lot of red tape and a lot of paperwork with that. And to be honest, like a lot of businesses aren't going to get to that point under the current financial system because there's so many things that have to happen to even make that worth it. And then you have to decide as a company, like, do I want to put this out on the open market and have shareholders starting to like almost dictate what I'm doing? But like, there's no way to do that in a personal sense. But with the advent of crypto, you can start to take your personal brand and you don't have to scale things to the size of a massive public company, but you can scale things to the size of like each person having their 1,000 true fans, like Kevin Kelly talks about, but like those 1,000 true fans being able to partake in the value created by an individual, as well as get rewarded for supporting an individual super early on. It's why it's caught on so heavily with artists. Because if you looked at artists outside of like a long time ago, I think where artists were revered, like we'll just hop back to the Renaissance, and you kind of had this patronage of people where like Leonardo da Vinci, for an example, you're like putting money in, you're giving him money so like he can create works of art and continue to do that. Like that disappeared for a long time. And there were a lot of super talented people that were dissuaded from going into art because it's not where the money was. But like since crypto allows you to really partake in that value and capture that long-term value from a supporting perspective, I think more and more talent is going to go into art. I think if you understand how to use the technology correctly as a coach, there are a lot of people who are super passionate about coaching, love to help people, but have a really hard time understanding like how to make money out of it. Cause like being a coach is freaking tough. Like working the floor, being a PT, like it's long hours, it is rewarding, but like there's a cap to that. I think if you understand like the monetization structure and the ability to support and grow, you can pull more talent into this space. And like in pulling more talent into the space, we're gonna like see more innovation. We're gonna see more Ben Patricks, where people are coming in and really obsessing over taking over like these fundamental concepts that change the way people move and live.
It's copped a lot of criticism, right? Like the Facebook, Instagram, social media influencer in fitness, and some of that's justified. You know, if people are becoming that person through, you know, through steroids and through just showing a lot of skin, you know, jiggling, you know, booties and boobies and all that sort of stuff. Like, you know, it's understandable that that gets some criticism, but for me, yeah, like great for art that art got a boost. Great for Apple and Tesla that they have outputs. Great for Bitcoin as a speculative, you know, store of value that has become less speculative. But we need solutions for health. You know, we need solutions for performance. Like, what good is the money when if you don't have quality of life? We know that physical development plays a huge role in mental state, mental health, and you know the joy of getting strong is something that a lot of humans are not experiencing at the moment. So, you know, how do we get all this stuff to not be about, you know, like I couldn't care to, you know, I don't care about art and people and all that stuff, like zero interest for me. What I care about is like what makes the human experience better. Like how do we make life better? And I think this technology allows us. It's like a really key technological innovation for the business side of how do we make life better on Earth. I think that is like on our doorstep. That's why I'm so excited about it. That's why I'm talking about it, even though I'm also working with ATG for coaches and ATG is booming. And, you know, Ben's just been on Joe Rogan and everything. Yeah. I can't not have this conversation because not every coach is going to be Ben Patrick, who's, you know, able to make the kind of turnover where it almost doesn't matter what he does, you know, with his wealth. And I'm sure he's going to be smart with it. But most coaches, by the numbers, are not going to get to the state of having, you know, tens of thousands of online members. I'd love to support more coaches to do that, as I'm sure, you know, you want to as well. But for those who don't, you know, what's the plan? And that's a bit of like why this conversation needs to be had as well. And if these structures were there, then you could benefit from seeing that Ben is doing well and supporting Ben to do well while you work on what you do. Just because you own shares in Apple doesn't mean you can't have a tech company. You can't have a tech, you know, you can have a tech startup and have shares in Apple, you know?
Well, yeah, I think it goes back to something you talk about a lot, and it is the gap between the understanding of the physical side and the understanding of wealth as a coach. And I view crypto as like such a cool aspect because it is hot and sexy and new and innovative and is going to be with us for a long time. But like there's a really good chance that if you were savvy enough to figure out and understand crypto, which really just takes like some learning, and we're going to be doing a pretty good job here of trying to give you our best way to simplify that. But if you understand how to use crypto, I can probably guess that there's a really good chance that like other parts of your finance are going to start to fall in order. You're going to better understand the value of putting money into assets. You're going to understand the impact that has on your long-term financial future. And there are going to be other benefits within that of focusing on this North Star of like investing in innovation that are going to start to fall into line, and you're going to start to win the wealth game as a result. And if you can win the wealth game, then like you can be in the game longer and you can really enjoy this in a way that, I mean, you just really can't. Like it's very hard to enjoy a career if like you are like as an individual, your family is financially hurting, because you're always going to be thinking of like, how do I support the bare minimum? What do I do next? And maybe even if you're super passionate about this, but the wealth side isn't really going very well, like your time in the game is going to be super short. For somebody who understands the wealth game, who understands the physical transformation game, like that's like a pair that you can really play this for a while. And the longer you play this game, the more lives you're going to impact, the more like we really start to see the health and fitness needle of society start to move and change.
Yeah, there's so many coaches. How many coaches do you know who leave coaching because they can't make enough money?
Tons in like the first 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, the statistics are horrendous, right? So who ends up being a coach? In some ways, yeah, it's probably the best guys, but in other ways, just those who are willing to put up with not having any money and put up with the risk. And that's not how it should be. Like if doctors and surgeons who can chop a joint off and put something new in and sew it back up, if they can, be driving Bentleys and Ferraris and having all the holidays, why is it not so that someone who prevents someone from ever needing to have that cannot have that same thing? Like it's the way society values, and it's the framing of what the value of a personal trainer, of a coach, of someone who understands the physical body and physical excellence. Like, where do we value that in society? And part of it is the money thing. Like, once you start to have money, it's easier for you to hold yourself in high esteem. It's easier for you to go after more education and really hone your craft. If you're just making ends meet, then you can't go and invest in going to conferences and things that the orthopedic surgeon and experts in any field, you have to stay up to date with associating with the best in your field, and who's innovating. A lot of coaches, you can do that, a lot of that online now, and people do it to an extent with Instagram and whatnot. But I think, having the financial ability to go and educate yourself, like, probably sets a lot of coaches, the best coaches, apart from the other ones.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting you say education as well, because I think that, like, I view this as having a massive impact on cleaning up the education in the fitness space. Like, educators are going to be able to use NFTs to better connect to coaches, and you can kind of support the coaches that are doing really well, are spreading things that you think is going to be important. And then you can kind of scale from there. So it's a double side of, like, you as the individual can use it with your clientele to drive wealth, but you can also use it from an education standpoint, because, like, the best in the industry are only going to get rewarded for putting out really good stuff. And you were going to have a clear cut line of, like, who's really good at what they do and who's a snake oil salesman. And you're going to see an industry that is, for better or worse, like we talked about, like, a long time ago on our first podcast we did, like, it's the wild, wild west. Like, is the snake diet good? Is keto good? Is this training style good? Is that training style good? Like, everyone's shouting from the rooftop, but, like, it's very hard to validate who's who and who's getting good information. Like, this allows us to clean that up and for you to learn from the best in class in a scalable and connectable way.
Yeah, with an NFT, like, if there's no demand, it's the price, the floor drops. The same as what's happening with a lot of this art, these projects. They have hype around them initially, and people can manipulate the price and manipulate the people on Discord and buy their own NFTs. And there's all sorts of ways that people are getting played. But ultimately, the value is going to emerge for those projects. The value is zero, and so they're going to go to zero. Like, a lot of the NFT launches that are happening at the moment, if you're a coach and you don't really have that much knowledge to offer, or if you're doing coach education and it's not working, then those NFTs will go to zero. But I'm not really clear yet on the best kind of business model. Like, I've been playing around with it, and I'm planning to launch my own NFT in the next week or two. It's very close now. But I'm okay with being sort of speculative with the model that I'm going with that, because I have another business that's a subscription business. But if I don't see yet very clearly how NFTs fit, if your primary business is like education, are you going to go to an NFT model where, what happens when someone trades it? Like, I don't really, it'll get worked out, but I don't see a working example of it yet, of, like, how it's really clear how it's going to work well for the coach mostly. I think it can work well for the customer, I guess, if they get the full benefit, if they're an NFT holder. But
yeah, I think it's going to be a further discussion thing. Because I agree. I think that, like, I have some ideas on how you could do it. But I haven't, like, sat down and created a clear line of sight on this is going to be, like, the way that you're supposed to do this. And here's a good model or framework that you can, like, follow. And I think, like, to be honest, it's probably going to take some testing from either or both of us, for, like, people in the community to kind of figure out, like, what models work. Like, I think that's the exciting part about this, is, like, we have this new technology. People aren't exactly sure what to do with it. They just know that, like, there is a lot of promise behind it.
Yeah. If you're big, then you kind of know it'll work, and it works, like with Gary Vee, and, if with a big brand that can drive demand. And also when you have other business and you have other incomes, then it's like, yeah, that clearly works. But for smaller players, it's a bit trickier to know like how many to mint and how the resale, if the resale revenue would just destroy your business in a way, if you print too many NFTs, and you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
there's some funny scenarios there, but yeah, it's all things to work out. And yeah, it's going to be fun to see how it works out. I think mixing currency like community coins as well is going to be a huge part of this. I've heard the guy from Real Vision, Raul Pal, he's talking a lot about social tokens being the next big thing, and he thinks social tokens are actually much more important conversation than all this sort of metaverse stuff. I'm increasingly convinced that the metaverse thing was like another bubble. Like there's always something that's the hot thing, right? So it goes from like DeFi to gaming to metaverse, and maybe social tokens will come up as the next hot thing. But there's like always some hot thing in the crypto scene where it's like this is going to be huge and everyone's piling on, and then it moves to the next thing, and that market cools off. That's certainly happening with the NFTs, and to some extent, like I was pulled into that as well. And I can see how it's probably going to cool off hard, and a lot of people are going to waste a lot of money. But the concept is at the core is like still so revolutionary and so important. It's just if you only get the memo of NFTs are cool, that's dangerous information.
100%, man. I think that like we're gonna have to see and wait for, so like as technology evolves, there are gonna be new applications. I think the big bridge between level 1 versus level 2 authentication, which we can go into in a later episode, is going to be a big jump, because like the better level 2 gets and the cheaper gas fees are and the cheaper NFTs can be as a whole, like the less of like the more you can experiment as a coach. You can go ahead and like take $1,000 and like mint $205 NFTs.
Yeah, well, you can do that already, and it's the cross-chain compatibility. So we may as well jump into it if we're going to talk about it. But because gas fees is what you pay on Ethereum. If you haven't bought an NFT yet, like it's worth checking out. But if you go and just go like, I'll just buy like a $10 NFT. If you do that from OpenSea on the Ethereum network, then you might be paying like $100 in fees to mint that NFT. If you buy it secondhand, I guess you just pay the gas fee. If you mint, you actually pay a higher fee usually. The reason why you're paying a fee is for the network to do its thing. So there's like computing on the other side of that, and you pay for that computing. Now that computing used to be really cheap, and now that computing is really expensive because of the traffic on the Ethereum network. But there are other networks that are much cheaper, and at the moment those networks don't speak to each other. So it's like if you have an iPhone that doesn't work together with Android, or that kind of thing, like you can't play your PlayStation game on the Nintendo. That kind of thing has been the barrier, but it looks like in the next couple of months there's going to be cross bridging. I own mostly Theta NFTs, and they're set on their roadmap is talking about first quarter having cross chain compatibility for NFTs. So on Theta, to mint an NFT is like $1 or less than $1, and to buy it, and the transition is like there's almost it's less than $1, so you don't even think about it. And that's, I think, the case probably on Solana as well. So I think that issue will dissolve really soon. That issue of like it's too expensive to mint. But yeah, there's still a bunch of stuff to work out. But the minting and the fees around any kind of changes to the NFT, anything that goes through Ethereum, like I think that is prohibitive to a lot of the creativity that will come. So I think Ethereum is going to be disrupted one way or another because of that. They're talking about ETH 2.0, getting rid of that problem, but they've been talking about that for like 5 years. And a lot of people say that ETH is kind of addicted to the high cost. So the ETH miners won't want to, they don't want to see the fees come down. There's just too much transaction volume. I don't know. That gets really technical when you talk about that stuff, but It seems like the market is big enough that the demand, like eventually it will be solved. Like banking is so bad that eventually it will be solved. Like the way countries run their taxes is so bad that eventually it will be solved.
Mhm.
Your schooling is so bad that eventually it'll be disrupted. Like everything has been disrupted except the most important stuff, because there's really strong, power and interests in keeping, things the way they are. Like the banking system, the system of countries, and the system of education are the things that have been probably least disrupted, where hotels and transportation, all the computing stuff like has disrupted, changed the world.
100%, man. So I think as we round it out today, like where should someone start with this? Like if you're brand new, like we're going to be talking about a lot of different concepts, but like what should someone dig into for 30 minutes to an hour this week to start to get a better understanding of like how this game works and like how they can start to apply their business inside of it? Because like to understand, like to play the game, you have to understand the rules of the game. But once you understand the rules of the game, you can start to figure out like how to bend those rules and how to like master those rules to like make what you're doing more impactful.
Yeah, I think the thing to do would be to really think about what you've heard in this podcast today. I think it's a really good starting point for like either you want to know about this and you want to participate in it, or you're going to bet that you're going to do okay inside the legacy sort of system, and not worrying about this, because you can if you make enough money, and you'll be fine. Like but if you are coming on this journey with us, if you do really want to understand what the massive changes that are happening and the opportunities within them, then an hour is not going to cut it. Like you're going to feel you're going to feel like you don't know much, and you're not going to know much. Like it needs, if you're going to go on the journey, then you want to be thinking about, okay, well, yeah, over the next at least 12 months, you have to be committed to, okay, for the next 12 months I'm going to put time into this rather than Netflix. I watch a lot of YouTube. I don't watch any Netflix. On YouTube, I watch stuff about cryptocurrencies and stuff about strength training. That's primarily what I'm watching, and then reading books and things like that as well. But I think that's probably the biggest thing to, if you're going down this path, then set in some kind of. It's really difficult to do in a short period. I have the Uncom platform, and I can put that link in the notes, and that if you go into the crypto section and you kind of just flick through that and spend like half an hour in there, you will at least have an idea of like some of the key concepts and some of the ways that people are going to try and screw you. And like it's dangerous to have a little bit of information on any topic, but especially in cryptos, if you're like, yeah, okay, this is really cool, I'm all in, and then you go and put your life savings in there, like, no, like that's not the first, the second move after the first move of thinking it's really cool. So yeah, that's probably the thing, Zach, of like, making that choice of like, I'm going to go further with this, and I'm going to commit to learning it for the next year.
So I'm going to change my answer from what I originally had. I was going to say that like the Uncom has like some awesome resources around it, or just Googling like Ethereum or a specific blockchain. Ethereum is a super easy one because it's very ubiquitous, and like literally type into Google, how does Ethereum work? And then when you read that article, like type in the next thing of like, how does this work? Or like, what is a blockchain? Like whenever you're doing research for something, starting with like the highest level you can, even if the questions you're asking your computer are like ridiculously simple in nature, I think will give you a really good space of what it's all about. Because I think where people lose themselves here is they just try to dive in to the 50-foot side of the pool. And then they're like, oh crap, like I don't know how to swim. Like build these blocks from the ground up, have a firm understanding to start, and then you'll be able to really figure out how to apply this. But I think to your point, the most valuable thing you can do after this is ask yourself, like, are you excited about this? Or do you feel resistance against the idea of cryptocurrency? And if you're excited about this, well, awesome. Glad to have you. We're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff. If you have resistance, I want you to ask yourself, like, why do I have resistance to this idea? Is it that I don't understand it? Is it that I don't want to get scammed? Is it that you are, like Keegan said, like happy where you're at? And then just kind of sit and marinate with those. This is something you can do for 15, 30 minutes before you go to bed tonight. And then just ask yourself that, like, am I kind of being like the old person who doesn't want to adopt a new technology because like they're good with what they have? Like all the people that had horses and buggies were pretty committed to those horse and buggies based on the sunk cost of like understanding them, knowing them. But then the car came along and changed everything. This is kind of where we're at here, where a lot of people are going to be slow to get into this game because they're resistant to change. And I think as soon as you can understand where the resistance lies for you, you can start to address those issues. I'm not saying you have to go all in on crypto, but I'm saying that like if you understand why you're resisting it, you'll better understand how to solve those things and be an early adopter than somebody who, when this becomes big, could be 2 years from now, it could be 5 years from now, it could be a decade from now, are going to be wishing that I would have spent the time to understand what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, cryptos are already pretty big, but you're definitely not too late. There's around about 10% of people maybe have them in the US, and most countries it's less than that. The statistics around that are different depending on where you get them from, but most people are not into this yet. But if you're young and a bunch of your friends have it, that doesn't mean that everybody does. The people with the wealth are the baby boomers, and the baby boomers aren't in on this yet for the most part. Mm-hmm. So yes, you're still early. It seems obvious with the horse and cart when you look back and you think, well, how could they have wanted that? But those first cars were pretty sketchy, and you didn't know how to fix them and all that stuff. A more recent example is the internet, which some of you may have seen. I guess you have to be about my age to have seen like people refusing to go on the internet and saying like there's no point in that. There's not going to be any business in that. There's no, so that conversation happened, during my lifetime. A more recent one is maybe with the smartphone, for those sorts of people. The next one after that is probably crypto. To my mind, I don't know if there's a better example that's jumping out, but like these things come up all the time, and there's that adoption curve of like the visionaries who get to it first. I think we're past that stage with crypto. We're in that stage with like the NFTs for business and things like that. We're in that visionary stage, and then it gets to the early adopter phase, and I think we're still in the early adopter phase for a lot of this stuff. So it's not going to feel necessarily that comfortable, but that's why the opportunity is there, is because it's too hard for a lot of people. Just like, getting on the internet was too hard for a lot of, baby boomers, and it took like 10 years of their kids and grandkids and everyone being on there. And now they're on Facebook all day on their smartphone,
Yeah, 100%, man. So glad to be starting this journey. Pumped for crypto and coaching. If anyone in the audience has any questions, especially on episode 1, feel free to reach out to Keegan or myself. Keegan is at the ATG Mentor. I'm at Zach Mobius. On the Instagrams is probably going to be the easiest way for both right now. And then, if you like it, leave a review, give it a download, comment if you're on YouTube, and pumped to kind of help scale technology, help scale innovation, and help coaches who are helping other people.
Legend. Good round out.
Let's do it.